Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. In this episode, we're going to explore what it truly takes to lead a high-growth organization through complexity, transformation, and rapid change without losing purpose, culture, or humanity along the way. You'll hear about how a clear North Star can guide decision-making during rapid growth and M&A, why leadership presence at the ground level matters, especially in people-centered industries. Also, a practical, no-hype approach to AI and technology that reduces administrative burden and frees up human connection. And the role of mentorship, honest feedback, and talent development in building strong leadership pipelines. My guest today is a leader operating at the intersection of finance, technology, growth strategy, and purpose-driven leadership. She is the Chief Financial Officer at Optima Living, one of Canada's top senior housing operators. Optima Living owns and manages 38 communities across Western Canada, supporting more than 4,000 residents and 4,000 employees, with a bold vision to grow to 10,000 units by 2030. Please welcome Natalie Ku to the show. Welcome, Nat. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it is my pleasure, and there's a lot that we're going to cover here. And but before we dive in, what really stood out for me, and I just really appreciated our recent conversation, was how clearly purpose shows up in your life, in your leadership, and in Optima's strategy. And so, to ground our listeners, I'd really like to start here. You mentioned that Optima's North Star doesn't change. This is a time right now where these change cycles are speeding up. I'm hearing this more and more and more. Change is here, but the change cycles are speeding up. But even though Optima's company is scaling and is going through rapid growth right now, this North Star doesn't change. We're in the resident's home, you shared, even if it's our building. Why has that framing been so important, especially during rapid growth and acquisitions?
I think in our unique industry, we touches the lives of people, right? We are literally working in the homes of the resident. Like, yeah, we our shifts sometimes start at 7 to 3. Every 8 hours, you have somebody going into their home. But it's very important for our team members and everybody that actually work with leaders on site at our community to remember our North Star. Let us welcome you home. That is their home. We have to be respectful and we have to give them dignity. And we wanted to create vibrant communities for them, that they do the activities every day, that and they enjoy their meals with the loved one when the kids come and visit. And we often actually say that it's not your last life. Like when you come to Optima, is you come here to live your best life. So in order to do that, our North Star has to be unwaver. And this is a North Star that a co-founder came up with in 2017 when they started the company. And from that day that they, very classic startup story, drew on the napkin, to today, that let us welcome you home have not changed. And it's our guiding principle in everything that we do.
And so, how does that guiding principle sort of act as like a stabilizing force, across the organization culturally, for staff, for the clients you serve? What is the utility of it?
I think the senior housing story, I mean, the industry is not as well known as, people think about the retail story. And Amazon, you talk about every meeting, you have, a figure of customer there. In our case, is very, very similar. We have to think about our resident, right? Whether we think about a billing process and account receivable that is very, very small, it impacts how a resident is going to pay us. If we were to change any process of how a meal delivery happened, how the presentation of a plate of food, right? Like it's everything impacts their day-to-day life. And they live there 24/7. And we hope they live there for 10 years, 15, 20 years, for as long as they're happy with us, and as long as they're healthy and can maintain that lifestyle, that they will stay with us, right? So it's a very long, um, impactful way, like small things to us that we don't think about at a support office, and we call ourselves support office, especially for that reason. We don't call ourselves a corporate office. We don't say that we're the corporate people in suits going into a community. Every time we go into a community, we actually try to dress down. We have to think about how can you make them comfortable in a conversation. We don't want to think, okay, why is there a whole bunch of shoes coming in? They don't really care about Optima. They care about Susan, that is in my room every day, that take care of me and help me out of bed every day. They care about the server that they see, or Jenny at the server, and that doesn't change every day. So all those impact their day-to-day life, and is extremely important that we remember our purpose, and that is their home, and we want to do our best to let us welcome them home every day.
Mhm. Yeah, it almost sounds like it provides that, like, a guiding light for staff to always stay connected to why are they there? What is the intention for your presence in supporting, your customers right here, which are your residents. And in addition to that, it supports with creating that real solid customer experience, right? It could and I really love how pragmatic it seems, in terms of how you've illustrated it, is that all of these interactions that we have with our clients, and I think this is, across industries, it leaves an impression. And so if we could keep thinking about that, and what is that impact? Is it delightful? Is it reducing friction? Is it valuable? Um, it can really support with that client's joy and that experience, and the longevity of them in our lives, connected with the organization. And so, how do you foster that from a leadership perspective? Is this something that you talk to on a regular basis and reinforce? Is it something that's sort of embedded into day to day operations? How do you really foster that connection? Because I'm thinking for myself right now, we have many different organizations that we work with, and even just this conversation is making me sort of think about each of these interactions that they have with us. How is that being experienced, right? And how could we refine that? So, how do we keep that sort of top of mind on a regular basis?
Yeah, so it's not easy. We have over 4,000 employees today, and counting. We have a goal target of growing 50% this year, and it's hopefully looking like very achievable by the end of 2026. And I'll have some good news to share with the world later in the year. It's something that you have to be very mindful, like your mindful institute, um, and it's designed through various touch points, that from a leader perspective to the managers and how they interact with the team. So we have a training program, and we often say that we don't just have good hires. We are actually, our head of HR often said that you retain and you hire. And actually, part of the training program is actually the resident focus. We have a program called Optimal Way, that we think about how if you approach at a community, if I can see, if I'm within 10 feet of a resident, I need to make contact and I need to greet them. There's a certain way of how we would wear our name tag. Our name tag is designed with just our first name. Like, I'm not Natalie Ku, I'm Nat, like where a resident would be able, because that's how, when you're in your home, you greet someone. You don't call them Natalie Ku, I'm the CFO of the organization. I'm just Nat in their home, right? So there is a lot of little things that you would design along the way. And the touch point from a leadership perspective is very important to go from our principal, who are the owner of our management company, and really the owners of a lot of our communities as well. And our steering committee, we don't call ourselves executive committee. We're the steering committee that steer the organization forward. Languages matters in an organization like this, because when you use the right language, people think about it, right? We don't call a resident, like, just like when you go to Marriott, people will call you guests, or Four Seasons. There are very, very specific words in the training on how to use it. We call employees team members. We won't call them staff. We won't call them workers. Like, they think about it. They're part of a team. You represent what Optima believes, and and we are working at the home of our residents. So that's the way that we hope that you could osmosis through multiple level of an organization, but also from a principal perspective, from my perspective, from my team in finance perspective, that they will have to do a site visit. They need to understand. So when something doesn't go right, whenever possible, we try to send our team member. It could be as junior as a junior accountant, right? Like that. They're doing account receivable. Okay, well, you go to the community, you understand if you make a mistake, what does it mean to a resident? What would a GM, the CEO of a community, need to communicate when you make a mistake on the billing? Yes, you make a mistake for $5 on the billing, but the GM has to face this person that who is like almost like the family that they interact with every day for $5. And that's their savings that you repeatedly incorrect. But if the team doesn't understand the impact, it's very hard for them to make the right decision. And we empower the team to make the right decision by giving them the right training and also the right environment and using the right language.
Yeah, so it seems like that this sort of core onboarding and having this sort of core ideology that's very familiar, and also it's baked into the decisions around the different terminology, right? The titles and how we talk about each other as an organization, how we interface with our clients. I think that's incredibly intentional, and how that supports that North Star. And right now you're saying bold ambitions, right? 40% growth, 50%, 100%. There's been quite a bit of growth that you've moved through recently. For how do you ensure that growth doesn't dilute culture? And I know when we spoke last, you were speaking about, of course, here there's this onboarding philosophy that seems just really resonant. Well, you have like these leadership roadshow and site visits and really staying connected on the front lines. I've heard more and more, especially now when there's so much change happening, how important it is for leaders to be really on the front lines and listening. What are some of these activities that you and Optima engage in to really support that growth in an intentional way?
Yes, and we actually just in the past week we just wrap up our roadshow where all actually majority of our steering committee member actually go out and actually do a presentation with our general managers, and we treat our general managers as a CEO of community. They're empowered to make decisions within the community and find out what is the best thing to do for the resident within a certain framework of decision making. We speak about what we achieve in 2025, and what we achieve has to make sense from their perspective. Is actually improving the quality of our resident, improving so processes. How do you automate to make sure actually you can maximize the time they can spend with resident as opposed to be sitting in front of a computer and doing mundane work that's not really adding value to a resident's vibrant living, right? Like when you take the general managers away to be in front of a computer and do expenses for 4 hours a day, that's not going to be helpful from a resident perspective. And so that's just one touch point. We also have a North Star session where every person that joins Optima as a leader will get an opportunity to meet with a principal. There will be a representative from our steering committee as well, from our senior leadership forum, from the support office, to talk about what it means to work at Optima, talk about our values. So that's actually part of our onboarding as well for new employees coming up. And then for any upcoming acquisition or transition integration, we also would actually have on site, of course, on day one, like but T minus so many days, there's already various touch point that we talk about what it means. The lucky part is this point is people know about Optima in BC and Alberta. Like we are from a sizing perspective, top 10 operator in nationally in Canada, and then in BC and Alberta, it's actually the only operator out in BC and Alberta that have reached that critical size. So people usually excited. They actually then they think about, oh wow, my company or my community is actually being transitioned to Optima. They were known for good at developing people, and we have a really good reputation as well. So we've actually had leadership team that is like, oh my god, I'm so excited! I can't wait to hear about your Rising Star program. Our Rising Star program is our in-house developed program to build a pipeline of leaders for future general managers. And then we also have a Shining Star program that we use for recognition as well, for peer-to-peer recognition. And then also some of the communities, actually a lot of them would have resin nomination to nominate other, like, outstanding members of the team as well. So they hear about these signature because we've been doing a pretty good job, like not me but my team or other teams have been doing a really good job on this. So we spend a lot of time from pre-closing to the date that we take operations and make sure that these touch points is consistent. We've done it a number of times because we've been very blessed on our growth journey in the last couple of years. So there's always room to continue to improve and continue to listen and continue to refine. But we feel very proud of the process that we have in place.
Yeah, it's incredibly intentional and thoughtful, right? And I think this is something that I just really wanted to highlight, especially on this episode, was how much care is being put into really thinking through this day-to-day experience, right? And I think it is not something that's too often explored, right? And these like a best practice on how to structure the really the experience dynamic in the organization and with the clients that you serve. It's very human centered, but it's also incredibly operational, right? And I know you've been, Optum has been blessed with a lot of growth recently, but I know that you've worked in industries that have scaled, right? And where efficiency often dominates the decision making, right? How do we, operationally reduce costs and streamline our efforts and workflows, et cetera? How have you found your leadership change when now like in scaling like a care centered business? How is it different from your perspective, and what have been some of these insights that you've learned?
In our industry, it's very difficult to think about cost efficiency. Like there is like everything impact a resident experience, right? We will never try to reduce staffing that actually affect frontline. What we could do is only looking at how we can optimize a process where we're taking time away from our general managers or from a DOC, a director of care, on their floor time that they're doing administrative work. How can we actually make it more efficient for them? And then actually when you deploy software, that cost is intrinsic almost like that people on site don't think about it. They just naturally adopt, right? Our electronic health record, for example, we rolled that out in 20, I want to say 2023, between 2023 and 2024. A lot of actually a new nurse that graduated university, they don't chart on paper. They don't want to chart on paper because they're not used to that process, right? It's almost become a requirement for us to continue to attract younger people joining this industry. And it's also talk about like expenses, right? Like when, of course, when the company were smaller, we're not able to deploy as many software or as many automation efficiency, and they have to use a lot of spreadsheet to do a lot of the I don't know, expense tracking and all that. Like right now, we have OCR technology deploy through our software partners Yardi, that invoices is centralizedly located in the office. What support office staff is, we have to look at how do you remove burden and how can we actually maximize the efficiency on site from that perspective. And in a way, like in senior housing industry is a top line driven industry. Everything is related to our reputation. When you have good reputation, you have good occupancy. And then when you have good occupancy, your building also feel more vibrant as opposed to be an empty building that only have 30% resident reps. This is some new development. Of course, lease up, you always take time, but a full building is a happy building, is what we say. So from a efficiency perspective, we always hope to achieve a really good occupancy. And we were very happy to say that last year at 2025, we ended the year with 94% occupancy. It's quite an achievement, and we're able to actually maintain every single year a 90% occupancy, even in the years of COVID. So it's again a little bit of accolades to the reputation that we have in the marketplace, and it's very rewarding from a GM to all the frontline thinking about, hey, I have jobs and I get to see the same resident every day because like we have good system, we have good culture in place for them to welcome more resident home.
I think that's that testament to the deep intentionality of the culture that's been fostered there at Optima. And, you know, building on this efficiency, and I mean, this is a conversation. It's almost like it's like a human-centered efficiency, right? You have to really think about, yes, okay, we're running a business. But really, everything is contingent here, especially in this care center businesses on that top line, the reputation as you shared. And then there's this reality too. Well, there are ways that we can think about this efficiency in a way that can perhaps establish greater human connection. And I know when we spoke last, that AI can actually pose that opportunity for us, right? And what struck me is that you have like this very grounded and practical approach to AI and technology. Focus less on the hype and these sort of bold goals, and more on solving these really real problems. And so how are you thinking about technology as a way to free leaders and staff to focus on people? I know you mentioned it here, but when we look at like pragmatically what role AI could play within your industry and at Optima, what is that looking like right now as you've sort of gone through this your experimentation process?
Yeah. So I came from, the e-commerce technology adjacent industry. So of course we're not deploying in this, technologies that is like top of the edge and super edgy stuff. But we have to look at where you can actually create impact, right? So we branded it Optima Intelligence, but in there is a suite of technologies that we would use. So for example, there is we're going to roll out actually very shortly in a number of weeks. Time clock where it's geofence on the cell phone when people are clocking in and clocking out. So it's easier than tracking your time on spreadsheet and just signing in on an Excel spreadsheet where it creates burden for the administrative manager on site to do additional work. To really introduction of AI, right? When I think it's true that our senior housing technologies sector, that our staff tends to be older and they find AI very, very scary. So we've actually designed, and even in our last leadership summit when we get all GM together, we had internal speaker to talk about AI. What does it mean? We also got Copilot licenses for all of our general managers so they can actually explore in a safe environment and they can ask question. Through the growth that we have been the transparency of information has improved a lot and was asked from the general manager, but it also can create information overload. So how can we give them an easy way? They have access to all property accountants and accountant from a financial reporting perspective to understand the financial well-being of the community. But they can also just plug the financial statement in Copilot and just ask Copilot, what does this mean? What should I focus on? And give them a pretty informed idea. We also have Power BI, and that aggregates all the information together and actually prioritize the most important information that they need to focus on. I'm speaking about it from a financial perspective because I am the CFO. So they would be thinking about the occupancy, they would be thinking about the financial well-being of the home. But from a clinical perspective, they also need to think about the safety. There's a lot of compliance that is has to be top of mind and how they would need to run the community at a day-to-day basis, right? So it's just using AI, teaching them and continuing to actually have conversation about it to reduce the anxiety of them using AI and just let them know like you could talk to them as a human. And yes, their information may not, sometimes you would need to prompt a couple more, and you should validate information if it's of something really, really important. And but it should be there to assist you to do the job. And those are like really fundamental technologies that we want people to have access to. And the goal is increase human interactions, human led AI, right? Like it's just you first, use this to help you do your job easier.
I think that clarity is and that dose of realism is so important right now, that it's human first using AI to help do their jobs better, right? And make it easier. And I think right now, that type of narrative is much more, I think, realistic than the sort of broad disruption narrative that's out there, where it's AI as a support, not a replacement. And then it's really interesting, from what I was hearing too, is that it's really empowering through automation, through whatever technological tools we're bringing in, and AI is another one of them that's going to evolve and update just like other tools right now, but maybe in a bit of a different pace, where it can give our leaders greater insight into the work that they need to do and what's happening within the business. And then also ultimately reducing this administrative burden. I think this is something that we're noticing too. A lot of these workflows that are coming in and being able to be automated, being able to utilize certain technologies to reduce even workflows, period, right? You can, like the geofencing, I think that's a really great example of it, right? Our phones are already connecting to modems and et cetera, or whatever buildings we're in. Well, here's a simple way where that just simply makes life easier for everybody. So I think that's really I think it's really helpful just to think of it that way. I mean, there is a lot of talk right now around additional sort of hypothetical future scenarios where the technology may take us, but well, I think that that's a lot. It's very hypothetical, right? It's very theoretic, and so right now, I think what you're sharing is being echoed across organizations as like the real grounded way of like, wow, AI can support us in these ways. Don't be overwhelmed with what it potentially could be. Yeah, I'm just curious, maybe just a little bit on that. You shared how you're creating this sort of ongoing learning environment to support the adoption and understanding of the technology. I've a recent guest that I spoke to. Um, he's this innovator of something called AI fluency. This term AI fluency of really developing a solid understanding of AI, what it can do, what it can't do, the guardrails from a security standpoint, et cetera. What he shared, which was really interesting, he goes, there's two things that really hold people back from any type of change in organizations. I believe it's a model that was created by Chris Argris in how to create a learning environment for experts who already know. So people, especially in their later years, there's this sort of learning anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, what do I need to learn? Do I want to do that? And then there's a survival anxiety. It's like, is my role going to continue? Um, how do you support that? How are you supporting that learning? What is it that's you're providing to your leaders and your teams to help them perhaps grapple with those anxieties?
Yeah, I think the talking about it is very important, and actually making sure that they have access to tools that we it within our secure environment that they can have access to. So I spoke about the co-pilot. The talking was really the first step, right? Like if you don't talk about it, AI itself is a very scary term. Like there's all these agentic AI, and then there is what AGI, what would that become of the world? And you think about Terminator world, but if you think about just AI today, right? Like it's people already. My parents are using ChatGPT, and they're like, oh, they're nicer to me than you are. So I started asking. Like my mom said that she started talking to ChatGPT first before asking me for my advice because I passed judgment and ChatGPT doesn't, right? But it was because of really encouraging them to explore and to encourage and to actually allowing them to do it, right? We I think that the co-pilot license a year ago, and then hopefully I'm not giving up too much on our leadership summit this year. We're going to have an industry leader on AI that would talk about best use case. We also actually is right now running workshop with people, like we're actually looking at leaders across our organization that works at a community or in operations of a community. It's like, hey, how did you use it? Because who are we to know how best to use this? Okay, if you work in a community, how are you using it to actually make your job easier, for yourself and for your team? So we want to hear those examples so we can actually replicate it and actually teach other people. So that's is going to be continuously, and also AI is changing, right? Like what we know today may not be the same in 6 months. So it's just staying very, very aware of it and making sure that we continue to use external resources and internal resources, and also thinking about and not forget that whatever you do, it affects our residents, and whatever you do, you're working at a home of resident, and make sure that our North Star guide in every single one of those when you make decisions, is the way that we do it.
I love it. I think that last piece, really returning back to that North Star, is so important. I think I've heard this just repeated over and over again through top leaders that are experimenting with AI, the disasters that can come without a solid grounding in the purpose and the values of the organization, saying this is the direction that we're going. There's already case studies of organizations just innovating AI for AI's sake and losing sight of really what the direction is of the organization, and that leading to massive distrust through customers and ramifications through an employee retention side of things and a whole host of other realities. So, you know, what I'm hearing from you is, for those leaders who are perhaps grappling with how to integrate or to introduce AI into their teams or even their organization, first and foremost, anchor it in your North Star, right? Remind and explore how, if we're going to utilize this technology, experiment with it, but how can this really reinforce the direction that we're going? The next thing being is fostering a safe environment for experimentation. So really creating these opportunities for the teams and leaders in particular to utilize the technology. And part of that as well is this ongoing communication, creating this environment where you have a feedback loop where you can be talking about it. And then as well, keeping on the leading edge of uh, development and learning. Just like, I think right now that's the biggest thing. We need to return back to this lifelong learning perspective that things are changing rapidly right now, and it's only going to speed up and ramp up with this infusion of AI technology, where all the platforms that we're using and the processes that we're engaging in are going to be changing. So how can we keep that open mind to keep learning, right? Never thinking that we're the experts, so to speak, right? It's just we're always learning. Does that capture, some of those fundamental building blocks you've been speaking of?
Yes, Michael, you're very good at summarizing. So yes.
Well, it helps me with my mental model, right? And I think, and this has been echoed as well through across a number of industries on how to really bring this forward. And I think what's really interesting too is there are there's so many diverse viewpoints within organizations, um and there could be some hidden frictions, right? And I think having that continuous communication loop where it can see if is there a culture gap, is there some other human friction element that's arising in the organization that's really holding people back, or there's some fear there. I think that communication can really really help, and there's some really interesting new tools emerging around that domain as well. Because, it's interesting. Some of the research, when you look at change management, they say roughly around 80% of any technological change that's brought into organization usually fails because of some of these hidden human friction elements. And they're finding right now some recent research, I think it was from McKinsey, don't quote me on this, but some recent research was saying it's closer to about 90 to 95% of these AI transformations that are really locked or blocked a little bit on the human side. So I think all those elements are so important. You know, um, I know mentorship shaped your own leadership trajectory, and now that you're really focused on paying that forward. I mean, even just hearing how clear and pragmatic your insights are here in our conversation right now, I can see how valuable that could be for those that you're interacting with. Why, and you've spoken as well about this leadership pipeline, really just really fostering and creating these new leaders. And I love these programs that you're innovating at Optima. Why is developing this talent from within such a core part of how you lead?
I think it, like you said, is paying it forward. If there wasn't a few people that believed in me through my career, I would not have thought that I had what it takes, or even the desire to be a CFO or an organization. I didn't think that I like it. I just want a decent paycheck and have a fun job. Like it was more important for me to have a job that I enjoy and is perfect purpose driven. But because people believe in me, I'm like, you think I could do that? And then once you start doing it, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, I do have what it takes to do this, and it is very enjoyable. So whenever I see other people around me that have what it takes and that they're not really thinking about what the future could potentially look like, I feel like I have a responsibility to identify and have a conversation with them about it. And some people are not interested, and that's totally okay, and completely respect that decision, right? But I think that everybody should have the right to know about the potential and have that make that decision for themselves. And that decision is a point in time. Just because it's not the right decision for them to grow the career or have the desire to continue to grow, it doesn't mean that's not going to be a case for them to consider in 5, 10 years later, right? So and I also think that's a very rewarding type of my job. Like finance sometimes can get dried. Like I generally like my job. I actually enjoy being in an Excel spreadsheet sometimes. Um, but there is nothing like I am the most proud. Like if people ask me what made you the most proud is the first name of the people that worked with me for the last decade and how I have seen them from an 18-year-old accounts payable or accounting assistant to who they have become professionally today, and that they enjoy doing it and they still see value in talking to me. Sometimes I'm like, you're asking me, like I'm like you're really successful too. Like so it just aligned with my own value of how I want to bring up others around me. And I really feel like it's a waste of talent, and hiring people is very, very difficult, and you never know how good they are. Like it's hiring, interviewing is based on their own self-awareness, and if they truly believe something, that is, they will communicate it, right? But until you actually work with someone, so why not give the opportunity to people that is already in your organization, that already buy into the culture of the business, and actually spend the time and the effort to develop them, right? Like the rates, I also, don't quote me on this, but the rate of the promotion that of working out in a new role as opposed to be hiring and a new individual coming into a new role, I think it's actually twofolds. Like it's the statistic of it, of the success rate. I have to Google it to actually, or ask ChatGPT to find out what's the rate, but it's definitely higher in promoting from within. So it's a win-win for an employer, for an organization perspective, and also as a manager. So there's honestly nothing more rewarding than seeing somebody under you or under your wing grows to who they are, right? Like it makes me more proud than what I achieve myself.
I could definitely see that, right? Because you also have that familiarity. You have, and that familiarity comes through time. With time, to really understand the potential of an individual and how driven they are, and how they apply themselves. And so I could definitely see an internal promotion and growth trajectory as being much more secure, much greater risk when somebody's fresh. And I think part of it too, which strikes me here, is that I think the more familiar you are with people, you can have more candid discussions too, and provide more candid feedback. And I know that that's something that's important for you. Almost, I think you called it like brutal honesty in mentorship is something that you value. Um, how do you, when mentoring somebody, how do you balance supporting them, stretching them, and being honest when they're not ready yet?
Yeah. I think the best feedback is immediate and specific, right? Like there is nothing like, okay, well, right after the meeting, I'm spending 2 minutes to debrief with them. Or if your meeting ended early for 2 minutes, and just tell them, hey, like you could have actually said this differently. This is how I would actually expect your behavior of certain ones. a- and I've actually been in an interaction where the person is not happy that they were receiving the feedback, and won't reflect on it. But I feel like as a manager or as a leader, you have the social responsibility to actually address the accountability on the team that's under you, or like when you're a leader, in you're CFO, like you can't just say, okay, well, this person doesn't report to me, but if there's certain things that you think you could make an impact on this person's development and improve on I feel like I have a responsibility to point it out to them and tell them this is how I would see it. Of course, it's just my opinion, and I make it very clear with them that is an opinion. I could be wrong, and my suggestion may not be right, but um, I just wanted to say your piece and let them know that I came from a good intention, and I think that growing within Optimal is very important, and I want to have a frank conversation with you. And sometimes when you actually perceive the person is getting offended, so why you give me that feedback? You're not even my manager. It's then you go back and say, okay, well, I could really not say anything, but I hope you would see this as a gift that I'm giving you on an honest feedback because I happen to see the situation. I it just kind of align with my personality. I'm super blunt as a person, and probably why my mom often said that I'm passing judgment on the earlier piece. The nicer way is a radical candor, right? Like if the person that you're developing, the person that you're mentoring in the team, if they're not open to feedback, and then not just feedback from me, but it has to be feedback from other members. It's feedback from their peer, feedback from their own team, feedback from the managers, the direct managers, or from leaders above them, or from other sources. How could they improve? Like we can only see the lens of ourselves. So like that's the piece that I feel like I have a responsibility as a leader. And I am who I am today because people were not shy to giving me their feedback on shaping who I am. I hope I will continue to get feedback and shape who I become in 10 years. Right. So I just think that that's my responsibility as a leader, or sometimes as a peer as well too.
It's interesting because there's a lot that I think you've learned along the way too. Is no matter who we are, how do we deliver that feedback skillfully? And I think there's that sense of vulnerability and humility that's so important to bring in, saying, "Hey, first off, sharing, how important that we feel that feedback is to help with growth and development. I know always, saying, hey, can even just simply asking, can I share a few points of feedback with you, can always create that invitational environment. And then further going that, I may be wrong, but this is my viewpoint, and here are some things that you might wish to consider. Right. And I really like that. That's a very pragmatic arc, just saying, hey, I think this is really, really important. And this is something that we're embracing here in this organization. Um, is this something that you're willing to listen to at all? And I may not be right here, but this is from my viewpoint what I saw happen, and this is how you could approach it, maybe differently, or this is what you could do next time. I think that that's such a great template to use, and I love this. Like it's almost like a just in time. We're not waiting to deliver it at a quarterly review session, right? It's a just in time, and so we catch it right there, and it's very specific and very timely. I think that those are all like just really really great points to as a takeaway. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And Mike, you touched on a very important point is the delivery, right? Like I can't start with like, "Hey, you did something wrong," right? Like that's not an acceptable way to appear to your team member. Yes, there might be in a team member is a very like it's a very serious situation that you might have to start with that for them to uh, uh, and understand the weight of their decision or the incorrect actions of what the impact have caused. But in most situation, you will have to get that invitation to comment and let them know you're trying to put their benefits at your heart and providing that feedback to them. And usually when people are like, oh, you're trying to give me the feedback for me and not like, oh, you're giving me feedback so you could fire me, then immediately the guard came down and it's like, okay, well, I am in listen mode now, as opposed to be, okay, I'm fight or fight. I'm going to be defensive, and everything you say, I'm going to repeat what you're saying.
Yeah, radical candor as well. Not only can it build trust, but also I think can diffuse any resentment. if there's certain things that we're holding on to on our shoulders, that's the weight that as leaders we're bearing, right? It's not the weight that they're asking us to bear. And I think that's really important here, that it's almost like a win-win in a sense, right? Where we can build trust, we can help support growth. It's compassion based, because it's to help them grow, and we've taken care of it, so it helps us by not having to wear that on our shoulders moving forward. It definitely is a gift. Amazing. There's just so much that we've explored here. It's very pragmatic, and I think incredibly value. Um, I think something I'd love to if you could leave our listeners with one principle for leading through complexity and growth at this time, what would that be if you were to boil it down?
Don't stop learning and don't stop listening, I think is the most important thing. I joined the industry not knowing anything about senior housing, like nothing. I'm not even in real estate, not even close. Um, 3 years ago, right? So I have to ask question, like really dumb question. Like I didn't know what a LPN is, learning practitioner nurse. Like at my first meeting, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Is this a person? Is this a role? Like it's you have to always start with curiosity and like assume you don't know anything and that everybody is right, and then pass have that information float through you, and then use critical thinking and validation with various sources to come up with your own conclusion. But you have to stop, like you have to stop making decision and have to really listen. And then the North Star, I think, I touch on it very, like we're a very purpose driven organization. I was very lucky that I always work for an organization that's very purpose driven, and to me that's very important. So that's North Star, and what is the most important from your organization perspective. Whether you're in finance, you're a lawyer, you're a caretaker, like it doesn't matter what your profession is, or like what is your company is trying to do, does it align with your personal value, and if it does, how best can I do my job in order to achieve that vision is extremely important.
Not to bring this to mindfulness, because actually I don't think ever in any of our episodes did I actually dive into this, even though I run the Mindful Institute. But when we break down the mechanisms of mindfulness from a scientific perspective, in a nutshell, it's intention, attention, and attitude. And it's quite fascinating that, the North Star is this deep intention, and have that as a core grounding. Attention is really being present, listening, being here, taking the information in. And the attitude is very much like a beginner's mind: curiosity, openness, acceptance. And it's almost like you boiled it down there from a leadership perspective, on how to be present as a leader. And I think that's very valuable to share. Thank you so much for this. I think your honesty, the clarity, and the pragmatism of how to lead during this time, and also just your energy is really refreshing. And I think we're all going to gain a lot of value from just your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me again.
My pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. We'll see you on the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.